This is a metaphysical poem by Robert Frost. It's called Wind and Window Flower. Lovers, forget your love, and list to the love of these. She, a window flower, and he, a winter breeze. When the frosty window veil was melted down at noon, and the caged yellow bird hung over her in June, he marked her through the pane. He could not help but mark, and only passed her by to come again at dark. He was a winter wind, concerned with ice and snow, dead weeds and unmated birds, and little of love could know. But he sighed upon the sill, he gave the sash a shake, as witness all within who lay that night awake. Perchance he half prevailed to win her for the flight from the firelit looking glass and warm stove window light. But the flower leaned aside and thought of naught to say, and morning found the breeze 100 miles away. So let's go into it. Why do I consider this metaphysical? Metaphysical because it goes beyond, it goes to a higher form, instead of the visible, instead of the visible forms. We're talking about something transcendent, something beyond this realm. But still, that something beyond this realm has an influence over us. So here, let's check the first lines. Lovers, forget your love, and list to the love of these. She, a window flower, and he, a winter breeze. So here we're trying to metamorphize, or transform ourselves. Instead of having this, the next lines as something that describes, or something that's limited to what humans can, to how we move. We are transforming ourselves into the body of the elements in nature. So here, the woman, she, a window flower. So, what do you say about this? What can we say about this? Window flower. Someone who has already is past, probably, who is already ripe, who is already by herself. Window flower. It's either she's connected to a tree still, or she's independent of that life-giving, or that sustaining root. So she's, warm, light, by herself. And he, a winter breeze, meaning, what do you say about this winter breeze? When you talk about winds, this is something you can't see visibly. Winter breeze, cold. He has that coldness with him. He brings it with him. But more of the air, if we think about the air, it's hard to determine where he's coming from, or what his intention is, because you can't see it. When the frosty window veil was melted down at noon, and the caged yellow bird hung over her in June, he marked her through the pane. He could not help but mark, and only passed her by to come again at dark. So when the frosty window veil was melted down at noon, meaning the temperature has changed. Melted down at noon, it's getting warmer. and the caged yellow bird hung over her in tune. So it's not a time for him. It's not a good timing. It's not an ideal time since it's warm. It's probably her own time. He marked her through the pain he could not help but mark. So he was still persistent in whiffs. He was persistent and only passed her by to come again at dark. So this is more of a sign, like he's trying to signal to her his presence. He was a winter wind, concerned with ice and snow, dead weeds and unmated birds, and little of love could know. So the poem is describing him as someone. So we're reminded that he's a winter wind, that he's someone who is cold. How do you say? Concerned with ice and snow, dead weeds and unmated birds. So this sounds very, for me, distant. Concerned with ice and snow, coldness and snow. How do you say? Silent. No. Dead weeds, unmated birds. So these descriptions are very different from the flower, from the woman. So you could say he's not really there for, he's there for one-sided reasons. Dead weeds and unmated birds. Dead weeds and unmated birds. No fertility. No fertility. Dying. Unmated birds. No love being conceived. No love in between. And little of love could know. So love doesn't recognize being part of his concerns, his interests, and his probably intentions, as we're gonna see. But he sighed upon the sill, he gave the sash a shake, as witness all within who lay that night awake. And he sighed upon the sill. So he gave his air, he gave his breath, his presence, he passed by. He gave the sash a shake. So probably the flower was connected to that tree. So she's still probably new to life, still innocent. And she was near that firelit looking glass. So that warm light at home on that glass, and warm stove window light. So she was comfortable, she was receiving warmth, and she was probably just at home in peace. And this wind just shook that sash, that tree, to disturb that moment, as witness all within who lay that night awake. So his presence was felt by the elements, by people perhaps, or by the environment, the place. Perchance he half prevailed to win her for the flight from the firelit looking glass and warm stove window light. Perchance he half prevailed. So maybe, perchance meaning maybe, he has prevailed, half prevailed, to win her for the flight, meaning he, as a wind, he took that flower to the air with him. And that's a very smart, for me, that's a very smart imagery. Imagine the wind just, going through, hitting that flower, and it flies with the wind, it goes with him. And So it goes, the next line goes like this. But the flower leaned aside and thought of naught to say, and morning found the breeze 100 miles away. But the flower leaned aside. What do we say about this movement? Leaned aside and thought of naught to say. So imagine someone, staying, putting your head somewhere, putting your head on the side and having nothing to say. So for me, that feels very how do you say, like she knows she was being used, or for that moment only. Flower leaned aside and thought, and she has nothing to say about this because she's probably shocked or left without word. And morning found the breeze 100 miles away. So, this comes back to he was a winter wind concerned with ice and snow, and little of love, So, you could see here that his intention was clear, that he was only there for a certain time, that he used her. To me, he used her for that moment only, and the next day he was gone. That's why she was there. She was there leaning aside and having nothing to say because yeah. So yeah, that's my analysis of Robert Frost's poem Wind in the Window Flower.